Good afternoon. What is a warm, grey and humid day? It is Monday the 12th of June. I've got a nice hot cup of tea and a box to continue delving into. So I have already pulled out a copy of Gamma Quadrant for Starfleet Adventures from Modiphius Entertainment. The next thing I have in here is Everyday Heroes, which is published by Evil Genius Games and is a 5th edition compatible role-playing game. So, get into the action. From the excitement of blockbuster action films to the combat options and tactical gear of first-person shooters, adventures in contemporary settings offer a wide range of opportunities and challenges. The Everyday Heroes role-playing game provides everything you need to run a modern-day campaign, be that car chases, computer hacking, radiation hazards, or just lots of guns. Along with flexible rules to create characters from hard-bitten soldiers to genius inventors and masterminds, these rules open the doors to playing through nearly any present-day plotline. This complete core rulebook for both game masters and players brings the ease of the 5th edition to the world's most popular role-playing game into the modern era. So, yeah, the thing is, we've not really had a modern treatment of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is now it. Now, what was particularly notable about the publication of Everyday Heroes is the supplements which have already been published or are going to be published, which detail some quite interesting intellectual properties. For example, the Crow, or essentially Highlander. Certainly on the case of Highlander, people are going, why haven't we had a role-playing license of that? In the past, 35, 40 years. Well, we have now through Everyday Heroes and Evil Genius Games. And I will do an unboxing of that, I'm sure, very soon. But, Everyday Heroes. So, we open up. It's quite a heavy book, so it's going to take a bit of time to go through this. So we've got that cover inside the pages, so we can see that in its full colour glory, which you can't always see on the front cover. So I appreciate that being included. It's always a nice touch. Credits. Including a QR code for a Serenscape soundscape, table of contents, forward by Jeff Grubb, notable designer of numerous games, including the essentially the D20 modern rule set, which published by Wizards of the Coast during the noughties. So here's the introduction. Advice on how to use the book, what you need to play, introduction to role-playing games, and advice for, are you already experienced with 5th edition games. Very quick example of role-playing there. I always like the inclusion of an example of role-playing. I always like it to be longer than that, but, can't have everything. Notes on regarding diversity are in there as well. And new discussion of style of playing the game, essentially the core basics of the rules in the first few pages, so that the game sets its boundary, or essentially sets out its stall, explains how it's played, and then we have a glossary or rules jargon. So forewarned, going into what the book is about, and that only takes a few pages before we are into part 1, heroes, how to create a hero. Here we've got a discussion of how a hero is created, how, 3 approaches: concept first, rules first, just winged approach. So, essentially you can think, what do I want to play in terms of, a type of character, or rules first, what do I want to play in terms of what am I going to get best mechanically out of the game. Just wing it, I don't mind, let's see what comes up. So then it takes you through a hero in 6 steps. So first off, concepting your character. I don't think I've ever concepted anything, but at each stage, you have so concepting your character, background. At each stage, you've got an example there. So you read through. It's nicely, clearly laid out, easy to read, and at the same time, at the end of it, you've got to go, okay, here's an example, and that's going to run throughout the whole process. Then we have a list of all the archetypes and classes, which will be further explained later on. So you've just got the, in quick introduction, quick list there. So then next up, we've got profession and ability scores. Interestingly, sort of like, almost tying the ability scores with these icons. And then we get on to archetype and class before we get to the finishing touches. And then bonus step is equipment, so basically going shopping, gaining levels, advice, and so on. And then we have a list of all the backgrounds you can have. So, you can have bookworm, you can have raised by assassins, you can have subsistence, survivor, wealthy family, and so on. And there's a quick bit of guidance in here for creating backgrounds before we get on to professions. These fall into things like broad categories, so academia, agriculture, athletics, creative, daredevil, finance. You can create. Obviously, here is trying to create a wide range of character types and make them all possible. Law enforcement, intelligence, journalism, investigative services, information technology, politics, private security, unemployed, white collar, all of there as options. Then we get into the actual archetypes and classes. So let's have a look. We have archetypes are done essentially, but you've got strong heroes, brawler, heavy gunner. So not all of these are applicable to one setting or another, but there are. You've got an MMA fighter, but it's giving you the options to sort of like, pick and choose, take from these, and drop them into the campaign of your choice. Somewhere they will work, essentially where they are appropriate. Then we have agile heroes. So if you're running a military campaign, yes, you would have a heavy gunner. If you're running an your agile heroes, and you're right, you're running a sort of like a martial arts kind of action campaign where you would have the MMA fighter, you'd have the martial artist in there. Scoundrel. Then you've got a sharpshooter over the page, and you'd have them in that campaign as well. Then we get on to tough heroes. So, bodyguard, commando, again, scrapper. Great for sort of like, combat orientated campaigns, but then you've got smart heroes as well, so you have those alongside them, or for a different type of campaign if you're running like a modern day horror campaign. And then for those, engineer. So we've got engineer, hacker, mastermind, see, we have scientist, and then we've got wise heroes, so hunter, master, sleuth, charming heroes. So falling under that we have duelist, icon, leader, manipulator. Chapter 5 is looking at finishing touches. So you've got lots of different character options there. You can use those to create quite an interesting ride for player characters, and then develop from them, a campaign about them, or fit the character types to the campaign. So things like we've got details for creating your character's persona, motivations and attachments and biography and beliefs and role and so on, virtues, quirks, flaws, just adding those little details. Then we get on to equipment. So wealth is kind of abstracted because you've got wealth levels there, and then you start equipment with equipment packs. Just equipment packs. So you can have a parent pack or a police pack or a socialite pack, weekend warrior pack. We've got specialist kits here, armor and shield, weapons are all listed, and we get into actual tables for weapons and equipment. So those are the basic ones. Advanced tables for your weapons. So historical melee weapons, improvised melee weapons, so complete descriptions and illustrations, military equipment. So honestly, I'm looking for this. It looks like a big, dense book, and something it is, but it's not as dense as you think, because it's you're going to be sitting through and going through and picking out what you want, rather than giving it sort of like necessarily a detailed read through. Got rules for ammunition, electronics, hardware, sporting goods. And then vehicles. So I've got a list of vehicles there. There are civilian land vehicles, to commercial land vehicles, and these are generic. But you go away and you go, right. You live in the modern world. You can apply a name to these. Military vehicles. Aircraft. And then we get on to useful places. That's a nice addition as well. It's sort of like armory, home, laboratory, storage unit, studio, and so on. And they can be sort of like upgraded and so on. Then we have feats. So feats are actually placed all the way back here because they're not actually under 5th edition. They're not necessarily as important. Characters do have them, but they're not intrinsic as such to player characters as they once were. So, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition or the D20 modern system. So you've got a selection of feats, basic and advanced. Things like, impersonator or jack of all trades, or racer, and skirmisher or seducer, and so on. So these all give you advantages in particular situations, and they open up further options for character design. It's you think racer is a minor feat. So, you're someone good in a car, but then you combine that with seducer, and you've got an automatic kind of feel of what the character is like. Good in a car, but, but also good with people in a certain sense. And some of these are feats tied in particular of the classes and archetypes. So, heavy gunner, there as a feat, it's a major feat, so you'd have that as your as part of your character anyway. So you've got feats for those, and then we actually get onto so that's all part 1. That's really devoted to your character. Before we get onto part 2, game rules. So the first part is really giving you a lot of options for your character. I'm really impressed by the range of options there to create interesting characters. So core rules, which is going to be the 20-sided dice, roll high. Basically you've got rules in here for assigning advantage and disadvantage, re-rolls, dice steps, adding and removing dice, and then figuring abilities and proficiencies in. So, and equipment proficiencies and so on. Ability checks, and here we've got the list of skills. And this is a bit more than to be found in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, but I mean that kind of reflects, the more complex nature of modern society. Discussion of saving throws, combat, so looking at things like. Handling surprise, position, initiative, combat turns, repeats or done. That's really just the overview before you delve into the details. And you're covering the actions: brace, attack, clear, jam, dash, gain ground, object interaction. And then a more detailed examination of the attack action. So both melee and ranged attacks are covered here, as you would expect. Special attacks, and also handling thrown explosives, rocket launchers, area effect weapons, because it's modern and you're going to get into that. And then materials, armor value, damage rolls. And handle how to apply damage and reducing someone to 0 hit points. What happens then? Effects of personal armor. And then we have miscellaneous rules. So this includes companions. There's a macaque. There's a monkey there. Things like mounts in combat, environmental challenges, hiding and seeking, concealing items, breaking stuff, traps, because the villains are going to lay traps for you, or your player characters might actually want to lay traps for the villains. I mean, the traps including hunting snares, door guns, landmines, and nail traps. So we are getting up into the point where we are doing with very modern and nasty traps. chases and vehicles. So, you know, you can do your Fast and your Furious if you want to. You know, adding complications, handling chase turns. Handling vehicles, so any conditions like blown tyres, body damage, loss of control, and driving a vehicle in a chase, including vehicle contests, vehicle stunts, risking a crash, crash damage to both objects and vehicles. And then vehicles in combat. So. And then we have the game mastering section. So I'm just going to take a moment because, excuse me. Do apologise. Hay fever comes with the summer, I'm afraid. So where was I? The GM section. So let me just go and find that. So yeah, mastering the game. So looking at the GM's toolbox, you know, whether that's dealing basically difficulty challenges, area effect, designing encounters, and then, you know, range rolls, grouping rolls, combat. You know, there's all the advice here essentially is on running the game, running different aspects of the game, so including chase encounters, just a good page. So that includes foot chases in urban locations. Building interiors so you can throw complications, and then you've got tables in there. So for an urban location, twisting alleyways, suspicious cop dumpsters, crowds, buildings, confusing hallways, residence, office, crowded hallways, and then foot chase, urban underground, steaming pipes, sewage, broken ground, defunct railway, muddy tunnel. So lots of options there for, you know, adding complications to your chases, you know, vehicle chase, city streets, you know. So essentially, this is, I mean, and this is the sort of thing that you can readily, easily imagine. You know, there are hundreds of movies where you have a chase through the streets, you know, whether that's through the streets of San Francisco or Chicago or New York. Lots of movies do it, and so it's easy to imagine, and you know, there you've got the rules for it. Investigative encounters and social encounters guidance. Relatively short. So restricting equipment. So, you know, not every campaign is going to call for you running around with a minigun. So there are guidance for handling that. Traveling, and then looking at computer hacking and security. Hacking the game, advice for that. Handling snipers, because, you know, your player characters want to get into position, and so are the NPCs. Standoffs, and then when all of that fails, calling in the authorities, and what happens then, because your heroes are going to be incompetent, but sometimes things are going to go awry, and sometimes, you know, the authorities need to be called in to deal with the situation. You know, even coming, you know, even to the effect of calling the authorities on the heroes because they might be breaking the law, even in pursuit of someone else breaking the law. Also, landslides and avalanches as a danger. Optional rules include inspiration, quick rest, tracking ammunition, sudden death. Poisons. So this is really quite a comprehensive book. You know, you are getting a lot in here to really run run a modern day campaign. You've got optional rules in there for injuries, you know, not just a case of, you know, you've taken some hit point damage, you've actually suffered an injury. So you've got a table of those as well. Okay, it does include advice on recreational drugs because they are a part of the modern day. So they're in there, you know, so that includes a wide range of types. So that, you know, their inclusion is really for immature audience. And then we actually have an actual chapter on running the game. So whether it's narration, handling hit points and damage, rolling the dice, saying yes and no, showing the spotlight, you know, putting particular players and their characters in the spotlight, arbitrating the rules, preparing the rules. It's essentially advice on running the game. And a lot of this works for any game, but it's still good advice. You know, all good advice on knowing your players and what they can do and what they want their characters to do. You know, options there, explaining improvisation to them. You know, handling that, setting the tone for the game, preparing for each session. You know, whether they're using published adventures or not, setting the pacing. And just more guidance in general. You know, and then just the guidance for, you know, help you as the game master improvise. Still good going because this is, you know, several hundred pages long. Milestones and hero levels and troubleshooting, you know, tracking and handling character growth and experience, adding in new characters, dealing with bad calls and problem players before we get on to creating adventures. So this includes length, one-shot single adventures, campaigns, and discussing stories for your campaign and adventures. So we've got just page, GM versus player driven stories, the nature of the 3-act story. And we've got a discussion of setting. And this actually goes with, you know, covers a little bit of sort of like changing technology. So it starts off with 1945 and nuclear weapons, and just sort of like looking, you know, this is sort of period what this could cover, all the way up to you know, 2010, the attack of the drones, where they're first being used, and 28X for the near future. Discussion of alternate settings, and not a lot of detail here, but I mean just a thumbnail kind of introduction. And looking at the different types of genres you can cover, you know, so adventure, drama, horror, mystery, comedy, building encounters, handling player choices, planning versus improvisation, so you can plan for your adventure but you also improvise as well on the spot. And then we have opponents and allies, so basically a big list of NPCs. So we've got a quick introduction to their stats details before we have the listings themselves. So master NPC table. It's quite a length, actually. Quite a lengthy one of these. This is actually the longest table in the book. Includes lots of monsters, modern day NPCs. So there we've got essentially a criminals, a punk, thief, goon, mugger, you know, so lots of those. Mob lieutenant, gang leader, all the way up to mob kingpin. Yep, you know who he looks like, kingpin. Cultists. So you've got a good range of NPCs all ready to throw at your player characters. You've got an espionage related NPCs, law enforcement, so beat cop, park ranger, you know, police detective, FBI agent, SWAT officer, police chief, military, all the way. So essentially, you know, you've got standard range of kind of soldiers you would expect to encounter, all the way up to veterans, generals, and even super soldiers if you're playing that kind of game. Security. So these are all quite sort of like, you know, very sort of like big martial kind of roles. We do have miscellaneous people, just normally civilian, but they can also be quite interesting. But they also include crazy maniacs, hunters, kickboxers, slashers for your you know, your maniacs, and also your mad scientists, ultimate badass, and then robots. So that's drones, auto turrets, robotic dogs, and then we're into animals. And these range from, you know, you've got alligators and camels and pigs and, you know, the kind of stuff that you expect. But we also got, well, where are we? We've got a swarm of piranha in there, of course. And historical NPCs, so you can move this back and you don't necessarily have to write necessarily have to stick to and the modern day. This will cover other periods as well. So, you know, we've got ninja, ancient hunter, barbarian warrior, ancient shaman, and these exist in the modern day as well. So you can encounter these as well without sort of like setting your game in the past. All depends upon the genre you are running. Then it gets fantastic because you've got prehistoric animals as well. If you want to do a bit of time travel, or, you know, genetic experiment goes awry. You have science fiction NPCs. It's I mean, you know, it all depends upon the type of game you want to run. You know, you can run a modern day where there's an alien invasion, of course, and you've even got an entity from beyond if you want to do horror. Alien bug queen. Futuristic robots. So, you know, obvious inspiration for that is, you know, you've got a hunter-seeker drone there as well. You know, the obvious inspiration for these from certain science fiction films, but that's not a bad thing. Mutated humans as well, super mutants and supernatural NPCs. So these come from a broad range of sort of genres: demons, vampire. What do you think, like a demon, vampires, then zombies. Then we're sort of like the kind of traditional other supernatural monsters. So you've got you know, reanimated skeletons, ghouls, gargoyles, mummies, werewolves, and the like. And we've got advice on creating new allies and opponents. And then changes to the 5th edition in the appendix. I think we're almost coming to the end with the index. So that is an incredibly lengthy book, but because it is 456 82 pages long, so there's a lot of content there, but there's a lot of flexibility in what it's designed to do. So I'm quite impressed with the content in there. Looking forward to digging into this. So that's Everyday Heroes, core rulebook from Evil Genius Games. Hope you've enjoyed this lengthy unboxing. If you have, then please do click on the like button down below, and of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a box containing a book or game, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.